God morgen alle sammen. Velkommen til det siste webinaret vårt i denne serien i høst. Det vil som vanlig være et opptak som dere får tilsendt etterpå, og så ønsker vi oss masse spørsmål i chatten i dag også. Vi skal avslutte litt tidligere, vi avslutter 9:10, aller senest 9:15, for alle som har meldt seg på og går videre til Avfall Norge sitt webinar om produsentansvar og nordisk samarbeid. Og så må jeg bare minne om at alle som ønsker en like fin julegenser som den jeg har, eller kanskje finere enn min, de må gå inn på tekstilaksjon.no og finne tips til hvordan man kan sy en selv. Dagens gjest i dag, det er Pascal Moreau fra Brussel, så vi går over på engelsk. We're switching to English. It's December, Pascal. It's the ugliest weather time of year, and it's actually the worst product concept ever, I think. But I do understand that Bridget Jones fell in love with Colin Firth at the Christmas party because of his sweater. This is a shared family product in my family, and I'm using it again and again and again, all of us, to give it a long life and as many use times as possible, which is very important. But it keeps asking me every Christmas, will there be a life after Christmas for me? And I said, I hope so, but one Christmas will be the last. And what service can I give to this sweater then? I hope you might give us some clues for that today. The producer responsibility is coming. Welcome, Pascal Moreau from Ohana Consulting, Brussels, a public affairs consultant with a long experience with and in the textile industry, H&M being one of your clients. We met some years back at the Sustainable Apparel Coalition in Amsterdam when you worked there, and we also meet at the ISPO Eco Award jury in Munich. So it's a very big pleasure for me to see you again this year, and looking forward to you telling us a little bit about what is going on in the EU. Welcome, Pascal.
Thank you. I will now share my screen, and the time I share my screen and share the presentation, I'm very happy to share the learnings I gain through my experience. I will try to give you most of the information that I can in the next 30 minutes. I have to leave at 9, but I'm super happy to be here. So what I would like to give you as key points for today is an overview of where the EU stands, a bit of an update on the EPR, so extended producer responsibility. I will use EPR most of the presentation, so you know, but also to give you a glance of what the stakeholders are thinking of an EPR, and some recommendations for you to, as a takeaway, to carry the conversation. So where the EU is, I'm pretty sure you heard about the European Green Deal. It's the European Commission's and the European Union's agenda when it comes to sustainability, and also for a transition towards the carbon neutral by 2050. Yeah. And one of the big points is a transition to circular economy, that I put it in red here, and they establish a new circular economy action plan. And why it's important for the textile industry, sorry, trying to move, yeah, is that the textile is really very much a core industry. They aim at changing, and they aim at making it more sustainable, and they compare it to plastic industry. And when we are in Brussels, we hear it over and over that textile is the new plastic, just to give you an overview of where they stand on our industry. And to do so, there is a lot of things on the EU agenda under the Circular Economy Action Plan. So when it comes to EPR, so extended producer responsibility, this come back a bit further up by 2018, when they actually put on the ground that by 2025, member states will have to establish mandatory separate collection for textile. So that means we will see different member states having different thoughts on how to collect textile, and to make sure it goes to have that second life Christie's jumper is asking for. So that's where also you are hearing different approaches in the EU, and I guess that's why you were having those different webinars on the topic. And coming back to the Circular Economy Action Plan, meaning today, by the end of 2021, the European Commission will propose an EU textile strategy, including EPR, but also a lot of activities on EU Eco Design Directive for textile and other approach. So design, waste management, secondary raw material, which are very much linked to EPR. And a bit of in parallel to that textile strategy, there are also other initiatives in the pipeline, the definition of end of waste criteria for textile. So by when do you consider them as resources, as products, as secondary raw material, and when do you consider them waste? I know you are having some discussion also in Norway on this. And just so you know, the EU Commission is thinking of maybe having some specific end of waste criteria for textile through legislation. So that would also apply to you guys. And they are also thinking of an EU guidance document with minimum requirements on EPR. So having that overall framework that each member state has to implement. So trying to avoid too much difference between the systems. Yeah, I already give you a bit of a glance on the EU textile strategy, what it means and why it's important. I think it's, if you think of EPR, it's great, and you will see you will be more and more involved maybe in the EU discussion, because really textile is going to take a lot of space. So you might want to discuss that internally on how you want to engage, if you want to engage, and how. Because the textile strategy will be comprehensive, so not only circular economy, but also social and trade. And when it comes to circular economy, it will tackle EPR, but circular design, waste management, as I said, but also transparency, so how to communicate to consumers, and digital product passport, which is a new tool, let's say, and chemicals are quite important. So just a bit of a glance there. I know it's not the focus, but it might be fruitful thoughts on how to engage at EU level later. I wanted also, before diving into EPR, to give you a bit of an overview on what Ellen MacArthur Foundation, also known as EMF, is thinking of circular textile for our industry. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is really seen as kind of the experts when it comes to circular economy. Usually authorities are very much going to them to understand what the industry should do and how we should change the industry. And they are very much also, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation is very much in touch with the industry through their co-partners. So from the Nordics, it's mainly H&M Group, but they're also discussing with other companies. And they very much are happy to discuss with industries. So that can be also something to think of, having a webinar with them, maybe. Just a few thoughts. And they have key principles when it comes to circular economy for textile, is to be used more, what Christy was saying regarding durability, reuse, made to be made again, so recyclabilities, they have some principles there, and made from safe and recycle and renewable inputs. That's where also the whole waste management and EPR comes in. I will be happy to send you the link on their vision for circular economy for fashion. Now I'll give you a bit of a context and setup when it comes to EPR. I just wanted, before we go and dive into the latest updates, what is an EPR when it comes at EU level? So we need to think of EPR and EPR scheme a bit of a difference. EPR is really the approach on waste management. So it's not the only, it's the one that France is using at the moment. But for example, Germany is just using take-back system, meaning that EPR will switch the responsibility to company placing products on the market. So they bear the financial and organization responsibilities for the end of life management of the product. And the scheme is really the organization, the system creating to do so. And you can either do that on a collective EPR scheme, so that means all companies close together within the country, or with individual. You will see most of the time it's only a collective EPR system. It's just because it's been set up like this, and it's quite complicated to have an individual one, but I will come back to that later on. And the end goals of this system from an EPR is really to make sure that the producers are not just, let's say, just putting products on the market and not taking care of the end of life, but really making sure they think from the beginning, from the design phase, how the end of life of the product can be made easier when it comes to recyclability, and also that they are in charge of the collection and the recycling of their products. Here, I would like to go back to deep dive into 4 countries that are quite active on EPR or take-back systems. Put France as first is because, not because I'm French, but it's because they are the only ones to have an EPR schemes at the moment for textile. All of the European countries have one for packaging, for example, but France is the only one to apply the same methodology to textile. And for quite some time already. They just reviewed the scheme last year with the new piece of legislation. It's not the perfect, it's the first one, so it's not the perfect EPR for textile. There have been quite some, let's say, critiques or recommendation to improve. For example, it's quite complicated, as I was saying previously, to set up your own individual schemes. I know, for example, some big companies that have their own individual collection sorting system. They have to go through the collective EPR scheme, so they're basically paying twice, which is, you know, it should be, I would say, a recommendation for you thinking to have this possibility for companies to either really choose individual or collective. In France, it's written in the law that you can do the individual scheme, but it's quite complicated to put it through. When it comes to the levy, so you have to pay, the baseline is the amount of clothes that are you put on the market, and then you can have reduction afterwards when you explain that your products have been designed taking into account circular principles. That's called eco-modulation. It's quite complicated to actually showcase that you applied the eco-modulation. So most of the companies actually don't even try to ask that, to have that reduction of fee, because it's too complicated to showcase, and it takes at the end too much resource, and therefore the balance of cost and money back is not efficient. So I would say one of the recommendations for your thinking is to make it crisp and clear as a system. And those eco-modulation are only based on the product design, but doesn't, for example, they don't take into consideration if a company has their own take-back system already in place. So that also could be, you know, something to take into account. And also with the new review of France, they added in the governance schemes, they added that NGOs and recycling organization can be part of their governance of the schemes. So just so for your information. Germany doesn't have a take-back system, doesn't have an EPR, but have a take-back system, sorry. And there was also a law discussed this year. And one of the issues was that municipality had the monopoly of the collective garments because they considered it as waste. Hence the issue of end of waste criteria that I mentioned before. Now the law has been changed through discussions, and companies still have the opportunity to collect the garments. So municipalities don't have the monopoly. I think it's quite important to ensure that municipalities don't have the monopoly, because you need to have enough flow of garment coming in so that the sorting structure, infrastructure, and collection have a bigger flow, so that it makes sense from a business perspective. So FYI on that. Sweden is looking at it. I know you had a discussion with the Swedish industry last week, so I'm not going into details on that. But Netherlands is also looking into EPR. The idea would be to have a law by 2022. They are discussing at the moment what would fit in the framework of the Dutch EPR. So what kind of product category it would fall in. So textile, so jumper, clothes, footwear, also bed linen and towels would fall into that. But it's not clear if carpets and if also curtains would fall in there. So that's also the discussion they are having. And it's an important one because in France, for example, home textile is not considered part of the EPR scope. So that's where there is a need for harmonization. Transition. I'm going into more like the stakeholder sides. Now you have the overview of what is happening at EU level and national initiative. And I'm going to go more into what is been discussed in Brussels from an NGO side and industry side. So you also have that input. So civil society is also looking into the textile industry, as you can imagine. They created a coalition of NGOs, which is the Fair and Sustainable Textile Strategy. It's coordinated by Fair Trade and signed by about 70 NGOs. And they advocate for a comprehensive textile strategy. So they have actually quite a super lengthy document, but part of it is on EPR, and I will only focus on that. But I'm happy also to send you more information on this after the webinar, so you have all the information on where they are going. What it's interesting, they are also calling for EU guidelines for minimum requirements, and you will see that it's also an industry request, so that we avoid miscommunication between member states, and it's help industry going forward. They also call for additional research or investigation on eco-modulation, you know, the fee leverage, because I think they realized that the French system, it might not be perfect, so we need to improve that. There is also a consideration when it comes to transparency of the whole EPR schemes. So companies bring a lot of money to the table, but sometimes it's not really clear where the money is going. So that's where the NGOs are asking for transparency on this. And they realize that the French EPR might not be perfect, so that's why they are asking for re-evaluation. What's their recommendation is to really reflect the waste hierarchy. So reuse should be the first and recycling should be the last, let's say, and to include civil society and social enterprises. By social enterprises, we mean those organizations that sell, you know, like second-hand clothes, for example. And the money collected should be obviously directed to the end-of-life actions. So collection, transport, sorting, reuse, and treatment, but also to ensure like the chemical legacy, and also to really discuss towards consumer, to educate them. And that's also something the Dutch EPR scheme is thinking of. For example, they're thinking, should we bring some information on the receipt for the cloth on that? So yeah, in a nutshell, it's what civil society is thinking of, and they are quite involved in discussion with the industry side, which is the policy hub. And the policy hub is a coalition between three big organizations. So SAC, Global Fashion Agenda, FASI, and FASI, which is the sports industry in Brussels, represent the sports goods industry in Brussels. Some of the members active there is H&M Group, Lenzing, Gore-Tex, PVH. So you see the link also with Ellen MacArthur Foundation. There are some overlapping members. And the Policy Hub is indeed discussing with more stakeholders, not only those 3 organizations. For example, they talk with Euratex that I know some of your organizations were member of before. And they're really pushing for circular economy. They already had 2 EPR workshops with stakeholders in Brussels. So with FEAD also was and Euratex were included there. And their position when it comes to EPR is to call for EU harmonized scheme as much as possible. So as said, it goes in line with the guidelines that the NGOs are asking. They ask for a specific set of common approaches. So definition, meaning what falls, what is textile, what is EPR, so that we know, from a business perspective, when a business sells in Sweden and then in France, it's the same understanding of what an EPR is. Also the scope of products, what I just mentioned between France and Sweden regarding home textile. Reporting obligations, so that means you will have, from a business perspective, you will have one internal set of rules to report that would make life easier for everybody, and member states will be able to compare the information. Financial contribution and recycling standards, that comes also to the eco-modulation, to really have strong points on that. Responsibility within the EPR, so that each stakeholder have responsibility, so it doesn't only fall on companies, but for example, civil society, social enterprises, governments also take their part of the journey. And yes, and the possibility to really have an independent individual scheme if you want to, and to make it really possible on not only on the paper, but in reality. So that's a bit the idea. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you because it's only 8 minutes left. But if there's any points I can help afterwards, I'm happy to do so. I've been talking a lot about the EU, and when we were preparing today, we were wondering how Norway could actually influence this. And you definitely can, because the EPR is being discussed at European Commission, kind of the government, but also they take inputs from the member states. And that's where also Norway has a mission to the EU, so that you could be really in touch with your representative in Brussels. And Norway representatives are very much working together hand in hand with the Swedish, the Danish, the Finnish governments. So I think that could be also another way, if you think of engaging at EU level, to do so. So coming back to opportunities for you maybe to engage, the reason why to engage, I would say, is that France will push for a certain way, Germany will push for another way on EPR, and it's always good to hear from other countries what they are planning to do. And Norway, as I said, has the embassy in the EU, but also you basically have to implement the legislation. And there is another organization, NF&TA, and that could also help you that from a government perspective. And also nothing is set in stone yet. Really, the textile strategy has just been launched. The minimum requirements guidance are not there, not yet published, and the end of waste criteria either. We will actually start the discussion on end of waste criteria next year in 2021. So it's really the right time, I would say, to have this discussion internally and decide to engage or not engage. And don't forget that they love, policy makers, they love when we have concrete proposals, concrete solutions, and explain what are the roadblocks and what we want. So the more concrete we are, the better. Just a quick hint on this one. And the last point I just mentioned. How you could engage in the EU debate, should you want to do so. You could collaborate with some industry organizations. So the Policy Hub is quite open to have some network organization around them that they could talk to. And also Eurotex. I know you're not member anymore, but they're quite active in Brussels. They represent the EU textile strategy and the textile industry, sorry. And so I would say they could be interested in hearing your voice. Eurocommerce is setting a textile group at the moment. So that could be, and I know you're a member of, so that could be a good one to either just monitor what's happening or to engage in a later stage. And FEAD is very involved in all the EPR discussion. They are really active. I saw them in several workshops with the Commission. So that could be another one to leverage. The mission of Norway, I mentioned already. And NF&TA, I also mentioned that. So that's maybe it's easier to start with the first point, the industry association, so to understand where you stand, and after to go to your country level. So recommendation, kind of a summary of all I just said. I would say it would be good for you to define what a good EPR would mean. It's usually the most complicated because we always know what we don't want, but what we want, it's always take a bit more time to define. And to base this on learning and recommendation from other sectors. I know Peter, for example, has been working on plastic, so it's interesting to understand what has been done well and not that well in that sector, but to keep in mind at the same time the specificities of our own sector, textile sector. Learning from existing schemes that you are doing already. Maybe that could be a good one to talk to the Dutch industry organization also. Modint is one you could I could introduce you to. Happy to do so. And really identify what are the roadblocks and what would be the solutions toward overcoming those roadblocks. And always maximizing EPR with circular economy and business values. When it comes to monitoring, just to know what is happening in the EU, I would say engage with the Policy Hub. You can also check their webpage. They have position paper, but maybe it's easier to engage with them directly. And when it comes to company organization that you're already member of, I would say Eurocommerce and FEAD would definitely be able to give you some updates. And what is good with Eurocommerce is they have the link with the different countries we mentioned today. So they will be able to give you a concrete overview and also deep dive into any specifics. And if you decide to engage or not, the first I would say is engage with other stakeholders to understand better the position and how you could bring them added value and go with them to workshops, for example, at the EU level. So the Policy Hub, Eurotex, Eurocommerce and FEAD. That's it for my slide. Sorry, it's only 1 minute left. It was a lot of information, but I can say 5 minutes if needed. I can say a bit longer.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pascal. This is very interesting and a good reminder for us in Norway that there is something called EU and Brussels, not just Washington and the White House in the world on the news. Very useful for our further process, but still, of course, we have some questions. Maybe I can at least take one question before you leave to your next meeting, and that's when we're talking about textiles, we are talking so much about clothing and maybe shoes, but there are something called home textiles, there are textiles in industry and so on. Is anyone in this organization you mentioned, are they discussing something beyond the clothing or promoting the idea that that should be included, or What's the debate on that? Non-clothing textiles.
Yeah, the policy hub is mainly on clothing. That's a good one. I would say Eurotex would have, Eurotex, yes, indeed, and Eurocommerce will have that broader scheme because in Eurocommerce, IKEA, for example, is part of that textile group. So they will bring this extra knowledge. And when it comes to the European Commission themselves, when they talk about textile strategy, they're think broader than clothing. They definitely have even carpet included. So definitely in their mind is bigger.
Very good. I know there are carpet take-back systems even in UK and United States. So we have to look around and think about it's not just t-shirts and your trousers. Thank you for that. The other thing, when you talked about European Green Deal and all the nice green strategies, all the nice buzzwords are mentioned, design and everything. But has anyone talked about targets yet? For us, if somebody is talking about targets, then we understand more. Did anyone discuss any recycling targets, prepare for reuse targets or reuse targets yet, or is that to come later on?
It's to come later on. It will be discussed in 2021. So I think if the Norwegian industry has some ideas on targets, that's also the good time. It's actually the perfect timing. We have that webinar. When it comes to targets, the European Parliament is thinking of that. For example, percentage of recycled content is something that a lot of people are discussing. But it's up and coming, and they all have targets in mind. It's not going to be just a blank check. So
it will not remain just with nice words. Sooner or later, we will have 30% or 60% target. And as we know, EU is quite ambitious when it comes to such targets. So we have to be prepared. Last questions. Just a few minutes left.
I can be 5 minutes late. No.
You talked about harmonization, but this is not a word in Norway to harmonize to Brussels or Spain or something like that. We don't even want to harmonize with our neighbor municipality. But when you talk about harmonization, what shall be harmonized? What's the most important to harmonize on a European level? Do you have any examples? Shall all the bins be yellow, for instance, like in Germany on packaging? Is that the kind of harmonization?
No, I think, for EPR, the harmonization would be more having a framework that decides, for example, if on textile is part of EPR. So that when you are a home textile company, you know, it's obvious that in all EU you need to implement, to be part of an EPR scheme. Otherwise, you will have your legal team, you will have to check every single member state's legislation. And obviously, we don't speak all the 27 or 25 languages. So this kind of harmonization that we are talking when it comes to EPR, really making sure like the big guidelines are the same, so that for companies it makes business easier, but not so to nitty-gritty.
Thank you very much, Pascal. You have to go to the next meeting, and we really hope to keep in touch with you, because dialogue is key here and we can learn from each other. So thank you very much, and we have to proceed because we also have to be finished quarter past.
Thank you so much, and I hope it was useful for your discussions.
Excellent.
Have a very good day. Bye.
Da går vi over til å snakke litt norsk. Vi har så mye som 10 minutter igjen før vi skal avslutte. Jeg sier noen ord først før jeg gir ordet til de som står bak disse webinarene, som en liten punchline før vi slutter klokken 15:15. Men veldig oppsummert så kan vi vel si at tekstilindustrien I Europa på hugget. De følger godt med. De vil ha fleksibilitet. De vil ikke ha noe tvang. De åpne for lukkede systemer, samtidig som de ønsker harmonisering, som vi hørte. Og vi snakker veldig mye om Brussel, men det som også viktig, det at I EU så finnes det veldig mange medlemsland. Det var nevnt at det kommer noen systemer I Tyskland og så videre. Vi har hørt om Sverige. Så for oss I Norge kan det være vel så viktig å følge med på hva som skjer I medlemslandene. Det jo ofte slik at medlemslandene vil gjerne promotere sine løsninger I Brussel. Så svenskene synes at Europa skal bli svensk, franskmennene enda mer at det skal bli fransk, og til slutt så det tyskerne som kanskje bestemmer. Men vi må følge med og la oss inspirere og ikke bare copy-paste noen andre land. Og så det med at dette kommer til å bli et EU-direktiv, og et EU-direktiv fleksibelt. Vi har lov til å tolke litt og tilpasse det norske forhold, så vi skal ikke se det EU gjør som en tvangstrøye. Det som kanskje skal si helt til slutt her, det vel at et produsentansvar ikke noe man får svar på fra en EU-byråkrat eller I et direktiv. Dette en prosess, dette må vi finne ut av selv. Men hvis jeg var tekstilindustri, så ville jeg I hvert fall I Norge, som da blir produsentene, så ville jeg I hvert fall hatt minst en hånd på rattet. For vi kan ikke bare overlate dette til noen byråkrater eller forskere eller noen politikere og håpe og tro at det kommer ut et system som perfekt for industrien og samfunnet. Her må vi delta aktivt. Og til slutt så vil jeg også si at disse webinarene vi har hatt nå, som har fulgt en liten rød tråd, der har vi ikke bare møttes vi som I tekstilbransjen, men det har vært åpent også for NGOer, avfallsbransjen og alle andre som interessert. Og det har vært veldig bra at vi sammen har fått en felles plattform for å håpe at alle har lært noe, og at denne dialogen fortsetter. Fordi tekstilbransjen alene greier ikke å lage et system, vi må ha en dialog med alle dere andre. Så nå løper tiden, så da skal jeg si takk for samarbeidet. Dette har vært veldig morsom jobb, og håper at på disse 4 webinarene at vi har lært litt og blitt inspirert. Men vi ikke helt utlært ennå, så får vi se hva vi skal gjøre etter jul, og gjerne I fellesskap. Så nå skal vi få en liten runde med de som står bak disse webinarene, og så skal vi begynne med deg, Kari, som fra norsk industri. Så takk for meg, og vær så god, Kari, en liten punchline fra norsk industri til slutt.
Ja, først vil jeg gjerne takke deg, Peter, og Kjersti og Marte, NF&TA, for at dere klarte å lage en så bra og innholdsrik webinarserie og gjennomført den så bra. Så det flott å se hvordan man på en måte kan få delt informasjonen med mange. Så vi I norsk industri vil gjerne bidra til at vi kan fortsette en webinarserie med disse temaene I 2021. Og når det gjelder produsentansvar, så det I hvert fall sånn at norsk industri, de ønsker ikke bare en forskrift, vi ønsker å få til en frivillig miljøavtale da. Det alltid holdningen der, det bedre. At da kan bedriftene få en større innflytelse. Så det, jeg vet ikke, Bror Stendig Virke, dere står for handelen innen tekstil. Hva synes du om det?
Jo, takk. Vi skal fortsette, det ikke noe tvil om det. Jeg vil som deg, Kari, takke for en fantastisk fint gjennomført webinarserie. Tusen takk, Kjersti, Marte og Peter, for det har loset oss så trygt igjennom noen veldig interessante og viktige webinarer som har satt et tema på agendaen, som vi for så vidt har på agendaen. For disse spørsmålene forsvinner jo ikke med webinarserien nå. Det nå arbeidet begynner, nå må vi være på hugget, vi må følge med hva som skjer. Og vi ser jo hva som skjer i EU, altså nå har det jo nylig blitt krav om, eller i hvert fall foreslått krav om varighet på produkter og rett til å reparere produkter og så videre, så dette jo ting som kommer til å treffe Norge hardt, så vi må være nødt til å være på ballen. Og med det så har jo vi satt opp et forum som vi kaller tekstilbransjens miljøforum, som kommer til å fortsette å jobbe med dette. Og da jo selvfølgelig, som Peter sier, alle invitert. Vi klarer ikke å gjøre det alene, vi må ha med alle stakeholders, sånn at vi kan forme dette videre. Og vi har jo god tradisjon med å samarbeide, Kari, så vi skal nok klare det også her. Men alle da invitert til å delta hos oss. Nå førte koronaen til at det måtte utsette, da, men den 22. i første så skal vi forhåpentligvis samles igjen, så de som interessert bare å melde seg på. Så vi kommer til å ta arbeidet videre. Vi håper å skape, sammen med, ikke minst med Kari og hennes organisasjoner, politisk tyngde bak frivillige ordninger som vi mener det viktigste, og som vi har god erfaring med fra andre bransjer.
Ja, da vil jeg på vegne av NF&TA også si tusen takk til alle sammen som har bidratt til at dette har blitt en vellykket og ikke minst innholdsrik og lærerik webinarserie. Vi har faktisk hatt rundt 500 deltakere, det betyr 1900 timer som brukt rundt omkring i landet for å lære seg litt nytt og bli informert. Og veldig mange har vært inne og sett på programmet og vært interessert, så vi veldig takknemlige for at dette har blitt såpass godt mottatt. NF&TA veldig glad i å samarbeide. Vi veldig glad for at Virke, Teko og vi har samarbeidet om dette her og satt i gang noe som vi sammen skal føre videre. For det kun sammen at vi kan skape mer konkurransekraft, verdiskaping i hele den norske tekstilindustrien. Og vi skal stå samlet, tenker vi, i møte med alle nye ordninger som angår oss. Så vi har lært mye, vi har høynet kunnskapsnivået, og vi ønsker selvfølgelig å fortsette med dette her neste år. Det har vært veldig gøy å ha med deg, Peter, så takk for laget, sier jeg til deg. De av tilhørerne som har forslag til temaer de har lyst til å lære mer om til neste år, jo veldig velkommen til å sende oss det. Da blir vi veldig glad. Og utover det så vil jeg bare si at ta en pepperkake, finn fram julegenseren, gå inn på tekstilaksjon og bli inspirert til å lage din egen av noe gammelt ræl du har liggende i skapet. Nyt adventstida og ønske om en riktig fredelig og god jul også i år.